Good morning. I guess it is actually still somewhat morning on your side of the
Yeah.
Atlantic. I actually just spoke with someone in Australia last week, and that one was a little bit more of a confusing math to figure out like what time everything was going to be because there was like a split on the day as well.
I've been to
um,
a company in China recently, and so they're in Shenzhen, and I'm in London, and we have like maybe a 2 hour window where I'm awake and before they go home for work. So we have to squeeze everything into this 2 hour window every day to have a conversation about our work assignments.
right.
It's really crazy.
Yeah, I'm just happy that both Zoom and Google do the conversions for us, so that we're pretty much 100% sure that we know where we're at. Um, I've got a website where I've interviewed probably about 10, 15 different Star Trek authors so far, and it's primarily just tracking all Star Trek books, which, as you can imagine, your name's on there a fair bit, and your work is on there a fair bit.
Thank you
Um,
on that. Thank you.
and you have a book that's coming out soon, within the next 6 months. That's going to be a Strange New Worlds novel. Are you able to talk about that book at all yet?
A little. I can't spoil too much, but I can kind of talk about it in general terms.
Yeah, sure.
So, what would you like to know?
Well, it's a Strange New Worlds novel. Do you know? Are you able to say like what time period it's set in?
Okay, yeah, sure. So I can tell you exactly, actually. It's between the episodes, let me get the titles right now. Um, Among the Lotus Eaters and Charades. So if you remember that one, it's the one where Pike goes down to the planet and starts losing his memory, and then the next
Hmm.
episode is the kind of the Spock comedy episode. So it fits in the gap between those two shows. That's in the middle of season two. We did originally talk about making it a season three story, setting it after the cliffhanger with the Gorn at the end of season two. But we decided in the end that we didn't want to bump into that continuity for the upcoming series because obviously, none of that stuff has aired yet. I've been
Hmm.
lucky enough to get to see the scripts and see where the stories are going. So what I did was I got to kind of have the best of both worlds. So I know what they're doing with season three, and I pulled a few ideas from that and kind of prefigured and kind of foreshadowed those a little bit in the events of my novel, which is called Toward the Night.
Hmm.
And so that is set like it's a self-contained story set right in the middle of season two. And it's essentially how can I put this in quick and easy terms without giving too much away? So it's a story about the Enterprise crew discovers a distress call, which they follow into a star system that's on the border with the Klingon Empire, and they discover traces on this desolate planet of starship grade metals, and they realize that there's a Starfleet vessel has crash landed on this planet, and they uncover a part of a mystery about a missing Starfleet ship that's been missing for 96 years. But it has a strong personal connection to certain members of the crew on board the ship. And the dilemma of this discovery soon turns into something much more important and a very sort of major moral problem for most of the characters in the story. And also we have some Klingon characters turning up as well, threatening our heroes and threatening our starship. So there's a bit of space combat action in there as well. And I had an absolute blast writing it as well. When I got offered the opportunity to do this, the first thing I said is like, do I get to pick what characters I write about, or do you want me to kind of weight the story to one particular character or another? And they said, no, you've got a free hand to write about the characters that you like. And the two characters on Strange New Worlds that I really enjoy the most is Pike and Ortega's. And I felt like to do a story that had those two characters kind of at the top as well to kind of get into the background a little bit of the character of Ortega. So that was really, really fun to write them. And I also got to have some fun doing some great stuff with Spark and with the younger version of Spark and with Una and Mabenga. There's such a great spread of characters there. They're all really, really fun to write. So I had an absolute blast putting it together, and I hope people are really going to enjoy it.
Yeah, I've enjoyed most of the should I say not all, most, but all the Strange New Worlds content, both the stuff that's on the screen and the written books. Um, But this obviously isn't your first Star Trek book. You've done I think pretty much all the different franchises. So you've got like a story in at least maybe Enterprise or Voyager. I don't think you have any stories with them, do you?
I'm trying. I have to be honest. I am trying to kind of collect the set. Tick off all the boxes. So I haven't done a Kelvin timeline story. I would really like to do that. I think that would be
Hmm.
fun. And of course, now we've got a whole bunch of new shows coming up. So now there's a bunch of new things to do. So I have done a Prodigy story. We're going to have Section 21. We're going to have Star Trek Academy as well. So there's new Star Trek to be done. But
Right,
but yeah, I mean, I would love to be able to do that in my Star Trek writing career to write a story set in every one of the eras. I think that would be great.
right. Now, would you want to do a comedy story, something in the lower decks tone of things?
Yeah, Lower Decks is great fun. I think I don't know if you could make Lower Decks work as a novel. I did pitch a Lower Decks short story. I
Hmm.
think you could do it because it's a funny story. Those short stories are like a good joke, so I think it would work well with something like that. I think the best example I've seen of kind of spin-off material for Lower Decks are the comic books, which I think really
Hmm.
do a great job of kind of capturing the feel of it. The thing about Lower Decks is a lot of it is very visual and very referential, and that would be a bit difficult, I think, to do in a long form novel. But I definitely have a go at it.
Yeah, well, they've got a ongoing comic book series coming out, so maybe you can pitch something for that show. See if or for that series, see if Ryan North will let you take the script for a couple
You know,
issues.
Oh man, I would love to do something for IDW. They're doing some really, really interesting work. I just saw, I think yesterday about the new thing they've announced, the Law War thing that they're going to be
Right,
doing. And they've got this sort of like ongoing thread, and they're doing some really interesting sort of collections of characters and just taking it in really, really different directions. And I really enjoy reading that stuff.
right, yeah, and they're using the format in a way that IDW even hasn't done in the past, where with comic books, it's going to cost pretty much the same amount no matter what you do in your storyline, as opposed to TV, where the more special effects and things that you're doing is going to cost more. So
Mhm.
that they're just going all out now with god level beings on in every other book.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the best special effects budget you can have, right? I mean, I've
Right.
always been a comic book fan. When I was a kid, I was reading sort of British war comics and stuff like that. And then I got into like Marvel comics in the 70s. So I've always been a bit of a comics nerd. And I went through a lot of my writing career, and I always thought I'd love to do comics, but I never kind of got the opportunity. And it always felt like it was something I was never going to get to try. And then a couple of years ago, a friend of mine who's a cover artist, a chap called Neil Roberts, he was doing cover artwork for a long-running British war comic we have here called Commando, it's in its like 5,000th issue at the moment. It's been going since like the 1960s.
Right.
And he said to me, "Hey, Commando's a great sort of thing. Would you like to try a hand at that?" And that's kind of very much action adventure, two-fisted World War II sort of stories. So I pitched a few ideas for that, and I wrote a couple of Commandos. And that got me got me my first comics credit. And
Hmm.
then I did some stuff for the Rivers of London series, which is an urban fantasy series that a friend of mine is the author role. He brought me on to write for that. So now I'm kind of hungry to do more comics. I've just done some stuff for Stingray, which is this British puppet action adventure show from the 1960s. It's its 60th anniversary this year, and I've done a couple of stories for an anthology they're bringing out. So for me, comics is a new thing I'm trying, and I'm really enjoying it. So yeah, absolutely. I would love to get my hands around a Star Trek comic book story. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, you've definitely done work in a lot of franchises that have comic books, or like comic book tie-ins. I actually completely missed the fact that you've done so much like Warhammer content, or Deus Ex, or I believe you did some work with the Division as well.
That's right.
And all of those have had some very successful comic book adaptations or original stories in them as well. Uh, if you were going to pick one of those tie-ins or franchises to do a comic book series in, which one would be at the top of your list?
Wow, that is a good question. I mean, Star Trek, I think probably would definitely be at the top of that list. Um, But I mean, if it was, if I could cast a wider net and say like any comic book story, man, I would, you know, run like the wind to do a Marvel story, to do something with the Marvel universe, because, you know, I've always been a bit of a Marvel comics nerd. So that's on my bucket list of intellectual properties to write maybe one day. I'd love to get my hands on that.
Hmm. Yeah, Marvel is definitely a fantastic playground to ever get invited to be associated with, even in the least bit. So, what were your favorite comics growing up in the Marvel side?
So the first comics I ever read, I have this very distinct memory in the 1970s of being in a taxi cab with my mum and dad going out for the evening, and the taxi driver saying to my parents, "Oh, there's a couple of comic books in the back. Your boy can have those if he wants." And it was an issue of Ghost Rider and an issue of Daredevil. And I had never seen comic books like this before. I'd grown up reading sort of British war comics, which are a big tabloid format, a completely different style to American comics, and it just absolutely blew my tiny mind. And
Hmm.
once I saw this, I was like, I've got to read more of this. And I got into Iron Man was the series that really appealed to me, and I read loads of that. And then if you remember the Rom Space Knight, which was like a tie-in comic, and there
Yeah.
was the Naught series, which again was a toy that I had as a kid, so I bought the comic book. I read a lot of Spider-Man comics as well, but I think the one that I've stuck with throughout the years is I've read all of the Iron Man stuff because I was a big fan of the sort of tech superhero.
Hmm. Now you mentioned Ghost Rider. Which version of that character was the one that like caught your attention first?
I think it was still Johnny Blaze at that point.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that he was the first one, right? Well, the first
Yeah.
motorcycle one, because there was a horse version of the Ghost Rider
Yeah,
back
yeah,
from.
like the Wild West version, and then later it was
Yeah,
like Danny Ketch, I think was the Ghost Rider for a while. But yeah, it was the Johnny Blaze version.
right. Do you have a favorite on-screen adaptation for that character? Either
But
Nicolas Cage or the one that they did in Marvel's Agents of Shield.
oh yeah, I think they were both pretty cool, really. You know, I mean, I'd love to see, I mean, I don't know if they'd ever do something like that, to bring both versions of the character back, you know, because you know
Hmm.
they've done that in the comic books. There's no reason why they couldn't do it in the MCU, I guess.
Right. So, do you prefer the motorcycle or the car?
Well, you know, I like the flaming tires on the car, and I like the big Hemi and everything coming out of the hood. I think that's pretty cool. But I think my favorite one was the Danny Ketch design of the bike. If you know the one, it has like the big shield on the front with like the
Right.
eyes slides down. I think that's probably the coolest looking Ghost Rider vehicle.
Yeah, it's almost like a scoop that he can
Yeah,
roll
yeah,
through bad guys and they go flying off of it.
big cow catcher kind of thing on the front of it. Yeah.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I've read a whole bunch of the Warhammer books, and it was a delight to be going through your works that are outside of Star Trek that and see that you've done so much work with that franchise. Is that something that you're still actively writing for, or is that a series that you've done some books and now you've moved on to other things?
No, I don't have any stuff in works with the Warhammer franchise right now. You know, I mean, I spent like 20 years writing for them, so
Hmm.
I've done a lot of stuff for that franchise, and it's you know, I have a lot of fun memories. And there's a lot of work I've done there that I've really enjoyed. But right now, sort of nothing on the horizon. But never say never. You know, I mean, I think if a cool idea came down, if you know, if they approached me and we wanted to talk about something. I would definitely consider it. I think the last thing I had released under the Warhammer banner was actually the 20th anniversary edition of my very first Blood Angels novel, Deus and Carmine, which was kind of cool to see this really, you know, this hardback edition. And for me, that was definitely a major milestone to kind of realize, wow, I've been doing this for 20 years. That's pretty much that's something.
And that's about how long the Horus Heresy has been going on, right? Seems like
Yeah.
that's a storyline that they're going to continue to mine until the end of the franchise.
Well, I mean, I think you know now the Siege of Terror is finished. Is like you know the ongoing story is gone, and it goes from being a kind of ongoing narrative to okay, now it's a period that they could go back to and tell
Hmm.
stories in that period at any kind of time zone. You know, I mean that was a huge experience. That probably for me, that's the first time I ever worked on something like that, which is a big multi-author, you know, multimedia project. I can remember being at the very first meeting with me and three or four other writers where they came up and they said, we're going to do this. do you want to be part of it? And obviously it's like, yeah, absolutely, because it was like
Right.
it's the source material, it's the crown jewels, it's the mythology of that franchise. And it was a lot of fun to be part of that, and contribute, a few novels to that sort of story going forward. And it's yeah, it's one of the most interesting, most exciting, most fraught, crazy writing experiences I've had throughout my career, and I wouldn't have missed it for anything. It was just really, really cool.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine anyone saying no to that kind of opportunity.
Yeah. Well, actually, there was a guy who did turn it right, who was in that initial meeting who did turn it down. I think he had sort of other plans. He went off and did other stuff. So some people were a bit daunted by it. I still remember them saying like, "Oh, it'll be like maybe 5 or 10 books." But
Ha.
well, and here we are. It's like 50 odd novels later, plus audio dramas and novellas and art books and game books. It became a kind of whole sort of industry unto itself.
Yeah, and good for them for building something that the fans were received so well, because they obviously wouldn't be able to keep it going if it wasn't something that people enjoyed reading.
Mhm.
I know I actually lost track of like the series, because there was a group of us at my work at the time that were like buying the books and then like passing them around, and then like someone else would buy another book in the series, and then we uh I think that we lost track of like who had actually read what, and like what was part of the collection, what wasn't. And some of us started reading the digital versions instead of having the hardback. And then I think I was the only one buying comic books at the time, and I was like bringing in like non-horse related stories to read in comic book form, and it was confusing everyone. And but still, such a great story.
Mhm. Well, now it's all done. You can go back to the start and start again, right?
Right. Yeah. It's a good checklist story to read now.
Yeah.
Which those are always good stories to stumble onto when you find a good story, like you get like a free, like the first book's free or something like that. And you finish it and you're like, oh wow, that was a good story. How many other ones are there in this series? And you check it out and there's 20 other books, and you're like, okay, well, I'm gonna have a good summer here, just reading the entire time.
Mhm.
So you had at least one story in Star Trek Explorer. It was the first issue, it looks like, and then it was collected in the first hardcover. Which I have you associated with the second hardcover as well.
Yeah, I did two
So
stories.
did were they two stories in that first issue, or is there another magazine that I've just like missed
I
your
was
name on?
two different issues and two different hardcovers.
Okay,
So
yeah,
one was the Enterprise story, which again I did that because I wanted to do an Enterprise story because I hadn't told a story in that time period, and the other one was a DS9 story.
okay, okay, those are good. Do you have any other work coming out with Titan? Well, the Titan magazines.
Not at the moment, no. I mean, but I'd love to come back and do another one of those stories because they're an interesting thing to do because they're really, really short. It's like,
Hmm.
and it's a couple of thousand words. And it's kind of like, in a way, it's kind of like telling a good joke because you got to have a good setup, you got to have a kind of good middle, and then a snappy payoff. And sometimes that's really difficult to do in a small amount of time. Is how do you create a story that can hit all those marks and kind of get out the door without sort of spending too much time on it. And you can also experiment a little bit with format. One of the things I did with the Deep Space Nine story is it's told entirely in like emails and like kind of security camera footage. So there's no actual kind of character talking to each other narrative. It's all sort of done in this kind of piecemeal patchwork version of a story. And you couldn't really do that with a longer story. You couldn't really do that with a novel. But with 2,000 words, you can kind of get in there and fiddle around with that sort of experimental format and have some fun with it.
Yeah, there's a real economy to the words that you have to be economical how you're using them.
Yeah, definitely.
So, as I mentioned earlier, Trek's definitely not the only franchise that you're in, but you also have your own IP that you're writing on. Um, uh, and I believe you just had one of those novels come out recently. It may be much further out than what I'm remembering, but I just remember right after you published the Trek novel, you had one of your own coming out.
Mhm.
Can you talk about some of those books that you've written just for yourself?
So, I mean, I'm primarily a science fiction guy, but when I decided I wanted to do some of my own stuff, I thought, well, I want to push myself out of my comfort zone a little bit and do something not so much science fiction. So I decided what's the thing that I like almost as much as sci-fi, and that's kind of action thrillers. So I decided to just jump in on that, and I wrote my Mark Dane series, which begins with the novel Nomad, and that ran for 6 books so far. That started up in 2016, and that ran up for, one book a year straight on after that. And that's pretty much in the sort of Jason Bourne, Mission Impossible kind of style of storytelling. It's very fast paced. They're big books with a lot of action and a lot of globe-trotting sort of adventure in them. And I had absolutely, great time putting those together. Those books did really, really well for me, and kind of introduced me to a brand new audience. And then off the back of those, I thought, okay, now I'm going to rest this character for a while. I'm going to do some standalone stuff. And so I've done a couple of sort of one-shot standalone thrillers. The first of those was called Airside, and the most recent one is called Dark Horizon. And that one came out late last year. And again, we've done really, really well with those. Got some interesting sort of film options for them as well. And it's been very different working in that kind of storytelling to doing the sort of like the science fiction and the tie-in stuff, because it's a very different audience and it's a very different sort of part of the industry. But again, it's been really exciting for me to be a part of that, to just try something different, because I find as a writer, I've been doing this now for nearly 25 years full time. And every few years, I kind of get a little bit bored and I don't want to get set in my ways. I want to do
Mhm.
something to kind of shake things up a little bit. So for me, kind of doing action thrillers was a great way for me to go, okay, let's try something new, try something that maybe you won't be so comfortable with, that's going to push you to kind of advance your craft and become a better writer. And I've really enjoyed the opportunity.
So can you tell me a little bit more about the Dark Horizon and Airside books?
Sure.
Are they're in the same characters?
No, they're standalone stories. I mean, they all kind of take place like in the same kind of gym universe,
Right.
my version of the MCU, right? A little bit. So there
Yeah.
is, if you look carefully, you'll see references to the other books, but not so much that you have to read them all together, right?
Okay.
So Airside is about a guy who misses the last flight home. He's this guy at a little municipal airport in the middle of Germany. So if you've ever been on a plane, if you've ever sort of been bumped off the flight and you're stuck in this airport, everybody's traveled has had that sort of experience about being delayed. This guy can't get home, and his career is kind of collapsing around him. He's about to go bankrupt. His business is bust. He's going home to, like, he's having the worst day of his life.
Hmm.
And then he goes into the men's room and he finds a bag with 2 million euros in it. And he doesn't know who the money belongs to, but it's like this, it's the solution to all of his problems. So he steals the money. But the people who left the money there, well, they want it back, and they are not good people. So now what we have is this guy, he's trapped in the airport, he's got their money, he's made a very, very bad decision. He's a good guy who makes bad choices, and he finds himself involved in this criminal conspiracy, and it's all about who's got the money, what's going to happen to him, but he can't escape, and he's stuck inside this airport for the duration of this whole novel. It's kind of a pressure cooker type story, very sort of close focus, very different from the previous books I did, which were going to lots of different locations. And I deliberately did that because I wanted to try and write a different kind of style of story. So that's Airside. I had a lot of fun doing that one. And Dark Horizon, that is a story about a pilot who is given a private jet pilot who is given a mission to fly a secret cargo to an airfield in North Africa. And what she discovers is that the cargo is actually a guy who's being renditioned. And this is all a sort of top secret thing that's happening with the security services. And the guy who's being taken, is being accused of being a terrorist, but he insists that he's not that guy, that he's an innocent man. And she's conflicted about this whole situation because she doesn't want to be involved in this sort of kind of thing. And then when the plane takes off, she gets a message from essentially the terrorist group saying, we want you to hijack your own plane, and if you don't, we're going to kill your family. So now
Hmm.
she's stuck in a situation, 30,000 feet up. What does she do? Does she hijack her own plane? Does she get involved? Is this guy telling the truth, or is he an innocent dupe? Who's really telling the truth? There's a lot of kind of conspiracy stuff going on there. And again, very much the same kind of idea, focused on one character in this kind of pressure cooker situation, and things just spiral out of control.
Right. So you went from the claustrophobic airport to the even more claustrophobic airplane.
Yeah.
Well, the in the opposite direction, but still. What is it about airplanes that has captured your narrative attention?
I'm a huge airplane nerd. You know, that's the my hobby is, you know, I love sort of planes. I love going to like air museums and stuff like that, you know. So I've always been an aviation enthusiast. And because I know a little bit about that world, I know a lot of people who work in that world as well. So I have like a Rolodex of people I can call up. I know guys who are like, you know, helicopter pilots and former fighter pilots, people who work at airports, and I can call them up and say, you know, hey, if I did this, what would happen is like, could you make a plane do this? Is it possible to do this kind of thing? And I love that because it gives me an opportunity to kind of make these stories feel authentic so that although there's a lot of action in there as well, I try to make it feel grounded and real at the same time.
Hmm.
And I just love that world. You know, it's just fun for me to be writing in that sort of in that kind of experience. I think because most people have been to an airport, most people have flown on a plane, so you have some sort of connection with that. You can understand a little bit about that world. And I think if you dial that up and you put a little bit of action in there, and then suddenly that becomes, you know, a great opportunity, a great place to tell a thriller story in.
Right. Yeah, it's a familiar environment, right?
Yeah, yeah. You kind of
Yeah,
just dial
it
up the action a little bit more, and it becomes like, you know, unfamiliar.
right. You can see yourself in those situations, which
Yeah.
are the best kind of stories to read. Now, are you more interested in the commercial aircraft, or is it anything that flies?
Pretty much. I mean, I guess military aviation is probably something I'm interested in. I think like the early jet age stuff, sort of 50s and 60s. I think to me is that I love that sort of golden age of crazy designs of aircraft, and you
Hmm.
know, space technology from that era as well is something that fascinates me. But mostly, you know, if it's a cool thing with wings, I'm interested.
Or without wings in a helicopter's case.
Yeah, yeah.
Which, although there's talk about like the actual rotators being just like four different wings that are moving very quickly through the air to keep it up.
Yeah, that's
Um,
what they say about helicopters are. It's a collection of moving parts in very close formation.
right, yeah. Which I've only been on two different helicopters, and unfortunately, my ears don't clear quick enough for like how quickly all helicopters go up and down. So one of them was a helicopter tour here in Florida in Orlando, where it's all just like very flat, and all you're doing is going up to see like what the rest of the city looks like, and then you go back down. And then one was up in Tennessee, where it was all mountains, lots and lots of mountains. So you got to see a whole bunch of like really cool stuff on that one. But in both times, unfortunately, I went up and I was like, ah, my ears hurt, and then I came down and I was like, ah, my ears hurt. So after that second time, I was like, well, I'll watch them from the ground.
My last flight in a helicopter was actually last year when I came over to do Shore Leave convention, the Star Trek convention.
Hmm.
I kind of extended it into a little aviation nerd holiday as well. So after I did the convention, I went to Washington, D.C. to the Air and Space Museum there. And then I went out to Ohio, which is, of course, you know, the home of the Wright brothers. So it's like the birthplace of aviation. And you've got the U.S. Air Force Museum there, which has got
Hmm.
incredible displays of aircraft, including lots of aircraft that there's only one of in the entire world, and that's the place where it is. And I stayed a few days extra so I could do the air show at the Dayton International Airport. And while I was there, I got to ride in the gunner seat of a Huey Cobra helicopter.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
that was really cool, I gotta say. It's so nimble. It was like being in a fighter jet, you know, and the pilot, he flew us out over a golf course and we were doing like simulated gun runs, buzzing people on the golf course. It was I had such a great time with it. I was like just grinning like an idiot all the way through it. It was really great.
So you said you went to the Air and Space Museum in DC.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. How many days were you able to dedicate to going through that?
Oh yeah, I spent like a whole day there. I mean, this is like the second time I've been there, so I spent a whole day there, and then another whole day out at the annex out at the airport as well, the Udvar-Hazy annex. You know, the first time I went, which was back in I think 2005, I didn't see the original Enterprise model that they had from the TV series, so that was
Hmm.
another reason why I wanted to go back. And I took a load of photos this time, is you know because they've done all the all the conservation work on that model now, and it's right by the front entrance when you go in. It looks fantastic, and every hour all the lights come on and everything, and it's just amazing. So as a Star Trek fan, to see that piece of history from the original series, that was really, really cool.
Yeah, me and my wife went there for our honeymoon, and unfortunately, the Enterprise was not on display at the time. Um, and then they put it out there, and I was like, ah, man, well, I guess it's a reason to go back
Yeah, definitely.
because the reason I asked about how many days you dedicated to it was because we spent the entire day just in the main museum, and we pretty much felt rushed, like to be able, like, we have to see everything here, and then we want to do this tour, and the tour took, I want to say, like 3 or 4 hours, because those the people doing the tours are like passionate about like just like everything that they're going to talk about, and I think they had a wing of the first airplane that flew at Kitty Hawk, that or some of the fabric, but they also had some of Da Vinci's notebooks there as well. Um, which it was just a blast to see all those, and it's always been on our bucket list to get back up there to see everything again in the main museum, and then go out to the annex. We didn't actually get to go out there at all because we were just there for we were in DC for a week, and we wanted to see everything, of course, which you can't see everything in a week. Um,
There's so many great museums there as well. I mean, when I went to the annex the very first time in 2005, I turned up on that, on a weekday, and there was like me and one school party and nobody else. So the
mhm.
whole museum was like just completely empty, and I felt like I had the place to myself.
Wow.
Just kind of just wandering around there, just looking at these incredible aircraft making jet noises, and it's just like, just just soaking it all in. I really had the best time there.
Yeah,
It's
kid
just
in the candy shop.
I really was. I mean, I have friends who are like, into different kinds of military history. So I have a friend who loves tanks. And
Hmm.
here in the UK, we have the Bovington Tank Museum, which is like it's 5 or 6 hangars full of tanks. And he said, "Oh, let's go there." And so I went in, and I was looking around, and I was kind of like, "Oh wow, it's lots of tanks." We went into the next hall, and I'm like, "It's more tanks, okay." And it went into the next hall after that. Oh, more tanks. And then the next one, it's a huge hall that's full of tanks. And I was just, oh, okay. And then I suddenly had this revelation. I was like, oh, this is what it's like when people hear me talking about airplanes.
Right.
This is what other people think. And he was so excited about it. But for me, I was kind of, oh, it's not my sort of thing. But yeah, definitely. I mean, just point me a dusty hangar with a couple of planes in it, and I'm a happy boy. I just love to look at things with wings.
Yeah, we have a naval aircraft museum down here in Pensacola. It's about about 2 hours west
That is
of
on my
me.
bucket list of museums to visit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's there's a pretty solid rumor that they're going to be putting some sort of space command over on that side, in that facility as well. Not that facility, but on that same base. So I'm sure they're going to have like some sort of space command museum over there after enough time, which is going to really speak to me with my love for spaceships, both fictional and non-fictional. But it's been a few years since I've been over there, but they have a I don't think the Blue Angels are based out of there, but they have their own demonstration team that flies out of there as well. And I've seen them a couple times from back when I was in high school and college. And it's always great to like see these guys flying around. Well, you see the jets flying around, and then what they did for us is they actually landed, had the guys hop out of the jets, and they just come talk to all the kids. And it
Mm.
was just like such a novel concept that like that jet could be being flown around by one person, and then they just land and get out like that. That's it. Like there's no like super special like system they have to go through or anything like that. No, just a dude blue
I mean,
jumpsuit.
I just like I mean, they are the best of the best, right? So
Yeah.
I haven't seen the Blue Angels. I mean, I was lucky when I was in Dayton. I got to see the Thunderbirds, the U.S. Air Force team, do their thing, and
Hmm.
those guys are amazing. And here in the UK, we have a thing called the Royal International Air Tattoo, which is basically the biggest air show in Europe. and they invite everybody from pretty much anybody who can fly in. And so here in the UK, we've got the Royal Air Force Air Display Team, which is the Red Arrows, who I think are in Canada right now doing a bunch of displays. And I've seen those guys fly, and they're incredible. But we also had last year, I think it was display teams from like the South Korean Air Force and the Italian Air Force, the French Air Force, the Royal Jordanian Air Force, all these pilots who are just the absolute tip of the spear, best of the best, and
Mhm.
just putting their planes through all these incredible maneuvers. For me, it was just amazing to watch that sort of thing.
Yeah, like the Olympics for airplanes.
Yeah, it's true.
Now, at that air show, did any of the teams do the they call it the sneak and peek here, where like two or three of the jets are doing something in front of the entire crowd, and then one of them's coming up behind you, just sub supersonic, and they fly over the crowd and scare the crap out of everyone.
Oh, so that happened to me. That exact thing happened to me when I went to Dayton. To when I was watching the F-22 Raptor display squad doing their thing,
Right?
and I was taking some photographs, and I was away from the flight line, and they flew away, and I thought, oh, okay, while they're going around, I'm going to go closer to the flight line and just get a better position to take some photos. So I'm walking up to the flight line, and I realize if all the people in the crowd are turned and they're looking at me, and I'm like, why are all these people looking at me? And then I turn around and I look, and there's the F-22 coming up right behind me. And by pure chance, I just happened to have kind of stood on the line, and this F-22 is coming in behind me. And as I turned to look, he flew right over my head and then put it on its tail.
Oh wow!
Ballistic. And so this kind of boom of pressure wave came down on me. And typically British, I went, bloody hell. What the and it's just like, oh my God. And that was just I'm hit by this jet wash. And for the rest of the day I smelled like jet fuel, but that was great fun.
Right? What an experience, though.
Yeah, yeah. Just right place, right time.
Yeah, I grew up down in just a couple hours west of well, not really west, but north of Tampa here in Florida, which is the Central Command for the U.S. military, and they did air shows all the time, and that was the first place I ever had one of those things happen where they intentionally spook the crowd, and it's always a blast because the way that they do it, when you write it down on paper, it's obvious where you got the guys going like north and south, and they're doing their thing that way. Then you got a guy that's looping far from north and going out to east, and then shooting up the westward way. But they usually will take a beach all the way down that way, so you get all sorts of great videos of them, a couple 100 feet up in the air, going down the beach until they get to where MacDill Air Force Base is. Um, and it's always a hoot to see them like doing the prep for that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And here in Tallahassee, where I live, which is the capital of Florida, we're in between Jacksonville and Pensacola. So when pilots are transferring jets or they're trying to get some flight hours or something like that, they'll come over here and then loiter around our city, and we get pretty much everything that the U.S. Air Force flies, just like flying around the city. Which, if you don't really know what's up there, you're just like, okay, well, that's a jet, that's two jets, okay, that's three jets that are following each other around the city for like 30-40 minutes just flying around. But you'll also see like the C-130s, the big cargo jets, and like helicopter squadrons flying around. And it's surreal if you don't know what you're looking at, because you're like, is something going on? Like, what's happening?
I think my family's always been, I mean, with a surname like mine, right? How could I not be enthusiastic about things that fly? And I think my whole family were always kind of interested in that sort of thing. My parents, they live out in the in Norfolk, which is out in the country, and there's a lot of air bases there. So there's RAF Marham there, which is where the F-35s are being based now. And then we have like Lakenheath, which is where the F-15s, US F-15s are flying out from, and the ospreys as well. My mother's house would regularly get buzzed by the ospreys flying low over. So whenever I go to see them, I'm always kind of out in the garden, kind of, oh, is there anything cool flying today?
Right.
And where I live here, I live in Kent. and I'm very close to Biggin Hill, which is a famous air base from the Second World War, where the Spitfires were based from. And so we're regularly getting aircraft flying in and out. They have a lot of helicopters flying in and out of there as well. So we'll often get the big Chinooks coming
Mm,
in. The British Army, we call them the Whockers because of the noise they make, because they make that waka 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 noise. And you can hear that for miles, that sort of very deep thrumming. And often two or three of those will fly right over my house off to off to off to Biggin Hill. And I think most of my neighbors don't care, but for me, every time I hear something, I'm like, oh, what is that? I immediately
right.
stop doing because I'm interested to in seeing what's flying over.
Yeah, this last weekend we actually had a football game, college football game here, where our home team did not do very well. It was a very unfortunate game. It's as we say, it's a building year. Um, but for that we had the Goodwill, or no, not Goodwill, but the blimp. Uh, I'm blanking on the name, but it's
Goodyear,
good something. Yeah, what?
the Goodyear blimp.
Goodyear blimp, right? And we have Goodwills that you can buy clothes at, but the Goodyear blimp was flying around, and they were like changing their altitude every now and then. It was just really cool to see them like loitering around the stadium. So on the topic of airplanes, what's probably the coolest one that you've ever actually been able to fly in?
That's a good question. Um, I mean, to fly, well, I haven't been able to fly in anything really, really awesome. I mean, well, the Cobra was pretty cool.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, I've done a few I've done a few hours in different aircraft and Cessnas and stuff like that. I was lucky enough to do a flight training course many, many years ago now in Atlanta, where I got to fly in a T-38 trainer, which is these old sort of like radial engine training aircraft, and that was basically a little Top Gun kind of experience there because they have like an aerial laser tag thing that you can do where you fly behind the other plane, you shoot with a laser beam, and smoke comes out the back, and that was really cool. So
Right.
getting to that, and that was part of the whole sort of it was a kind of like a sort of space camp, but for planes, for sort of
Hmm.
like a Top Gun version of space camp kind of thing that I did. That was a lot of fun doing that. But yeah, I mean, I've been lucky enough to see some really sort of incredible aircraft flying. The seeing the SR-71 Blackbird back when I was a kid, the first time that ever came to the UK. The Vulcan bomber, which is probably one of the most amazing aircraft, this huge delta wing aircraft. They don't fly them anymore, sadly. But yeah, and I'm close to the Battle of Britain Memorial flight will often come over here, so we'll see aircraft from the Second World War, the Spitfire and the Hurricane and the Lancaster. These kind of venerable warbirds that are still flying all these decades later. That's just that's pretty amazing to see that, and they have such a distinctive sound as well. You hear that engine. Oh, that can only be one thing. It's really,
Hmm.
really.
Yeah. Um, so you mentioned that you came over for shore leave. Was that 23 that you came over for that, or was that before
Yeah,
the pandemic? Okay,
yeah.
yeah, that was I just went to my first shore leave this year, so about 2 months ago now. Yeah. And it was an absolute blast. I did all sorts of like pre-interviews with Trek authors beforehand to, get a feel for what the show is going to be like and promote the show, and of course promote the authors. But it was an experience. I've been to different shows like big and small. Was that the first time you went to shore leave, or you been going to them?
I think the first time I went was '05.
Hmm.
So you didn't go to the old hotel. You've gone to where they moved to the new hotel now, right?
Right.
Yeah.
We've gone to the new one, which there was people had comments about it because it's a very organically grown kind of location where it was like originally just like a small hotel. Then they added onto it, then they added onto it, and they added onto it. So it's a bit of a labyrinth at sometimes. But once you figure it out, it's easy enough to know where you're going.
The thing about the other hotel, the Delta, I think um, it was very horse themed. That's the thing. It's like horses everywhere, huge pit everywhere. If you were somebody who was like terrified of horses, you couldn't stay in that hotel because everywhere you went, it was a horse picture here or a horse picture there. And once I noticed it, I couldn't stop noticing it. It's another horse picture. It's another horse picture. But that
Right.
was but no, that's a really great event. I mean, as a British writer, I don't often get invited out to US events because it's expensive to bring me over. But I did Shore Leave all those years ago, and they said, whenever you want to come back, our door is always open. We love to have you, which is really, really nice to hear. And I thought, well, I'll give it a few years, wait until I've got some more books out, so I've got a good reason to go, and I've got some stuff to promote. And we'd just done myself and Dayton Ward and Dave Mack, we'd done the Coda trilogy. And we were talking about it, and I said, well, you know what, this is a good opportunity now because the three of us could get together and we could talk about the books, and it's a big event sort of thing. It's a good reason for us to get back together. So I said, yeah, absolutely, I'll do this. And then I married it as I set up with the holiday, a little bit of a vacation for myself, going to the museums and everything. Um, and I had a great time. Everybody was super welcoming. They were so happy to have me come over, and everybody was saying thank you for making the effort to come to see us. And people came along to listen to me and Dave and Dayton talk about our books, and it was really great. It's just everybody's really engaged, and there's a great sort of sense of community, especially it's because Shore Leave is like the convention to go to if you like Star Trek fiction, because all the
Hmm.
Star Trek writers, or most of them come along to that. And there's a great kind of collegiate sense amongst the writing team, is that we all feel like we're kind of working together to going in the same direction. So it's very supportive, it's very friendly, and the fan base there is like just lovely, lovely people. So I was thinking as soon as I came back, I thought, right, I'm not going to leave it so long next time. I'll give it a couple of years maybe, and come back again, definitely.
Yeah, I plan on going back as often as I can. I'm a little closer than you are, so it's a little easier for me. But at the same time, though, like anytime you fly, commercial, there's a cost to it, and you have to pay the hotel costs, and you got to pay for all the food while you're there. And obviously, if you're going on this trip, you're going to have to buy a bunch of books. It's pretty much mandatory.
Mhm.
Which this case, I actually got a fair number of comic books from the 80s and 90s books from a few of the authors that had written those at the time, and they were like, "Well, I've got a bunch of comic books in my personal collection. You want to buy them?" And I was like, "Sure. Maybe I'll even get some of them signed from you too."
I
But
mean,
yeah,
I had to take an additional piece of luggage home with me because I bought so many books.
that's
In
actually what I was about to say too. I Russian doll nested them on the way up there, and then on the way back, I was very like I had to get like a backpack too, and then like read very specifically like what am I allowed to carry on versus what I'm not allowed to carry on, and it was a razor thin margin there on getting everything back to home.
I went into Walmart and I bought one of those moving boxes that I
Hmm.
could, and then just taped that all up and paid for an additional piece of luggage on the way home. Because I love I collect thriller novels from the 70s and the 80s, the kind of golden age of pulpy thrillers and
Hmm.
sci-fi novels from that era. So there's a lot of them that they're quite cheap, but they're hard to get in the UK because the cost of posting them is like double, triple what you pay for the actual book.
Hmm.
I was doing is I'd order like 20 books and then have them all delivered to my hotel. And then while I was in whatever town I was in, I was going to all the secondhand bookstores and buying, buying, buying. And so at the end of it, I had this huge wall. I took a photograph of it, posted up on my social media, this massive pile of books. And I thought, I don't know how much it's going to cost me to get those back. But it actually worked out cheaper in the end because if I'd have paid to send them over, it would have cost me hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
Right. So that's the trick then is to just send yourself,
Yeah.
and then you can do all the recon, make sure you get the right books. Although I always, even though I have like multiple ways of tracking my Star Trek book collection and my comic books, I always end up buying duplicates somehow. And in the heat of the moment, I'm sure that like I don't have this one. It's not on any of my lists. I'm gonna buy it, and then I get home and I'm like, well, it's good to have like a second or third or fourth version of this.
Well, you can always turn. I mean, we have where I live, we have the little free library. So if I ever have
Mm,
extra copies of my books, I often will get sent proof copies of books, or if somebody wants me to write a cover blurb, or just like previews. And what I do is I keep those, and like maybe every sort of 3 or 4 months, I go, okay, what have I got? And I go and donate those.
hmm.
Because I think that's important to keep. It gives people an opportunity to read, and if they're heading up for the train, they want to grab something. Well, there's a book right there. I think it's it's good for the community to keep that going.
Right, and it gets all of your book tastes out into the world so that you can help other people find the same stuff that you enjoy reading.
And occasionally, if I have some extra copies of my book, I'll sign a copy or something, and I'll just put it out there as a freebie for someone and say, here, here's a nice free gift for someone. It'll be like maybe, make their day. They'll pick up and go, oh, it's a signed copy, and that's kind of cool. I like doing that.
Yeah, that's very magnanimous. Um, so to bring it back to Star Trek, you've got the Strange New Worlds book coming out very soon. We've already got cover art for it. Is it getting an audiobook adaptation?
I believe so. I believe that's a plan. So the initial release is going to be hardcover, and audiobook and ebook. And I think if it follows the usual sort of rules, it will be kind of paperback within 6 to 12 months afterwards.
Right. Uh, do you know who's narrating this one?
I do not. I'm assuming it will probably be Robert Petkoff because Robert does most of our books, but they don't tell us, so we just kind of find out when you guys do, really.
Right. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it may even be listed somewhere already. I haven't done the research, but yeah, it's those audiobooks are well received. I know many people that are just in my life that would prefer to hear the book than like visually read the book. And there used to be a time that I would be like, is it really reading if you're, listening? But uh, I think I've come around to the idea that if you're getting the story into your brain, like however it's getting there, like you're getting the story. It doesn't, you don't really need to split the hairs. Um, Especially
Yeah,
when you have people as good as Mr. Petkoff doing the
yeah,
narration.
I agree completely. I think, like, it's what I want to see as a writer is I want to see people consuming my stories and hopefully enjoying them. And if you want to do that in a dead tree paper book, or you want to do that with a digital book, or you want to do that with audio, you go right ahead. Whatever, whatever people enjoy, I think is whatever avenue into the story they want to choose, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, and I think it was when I had to switch from the papers to the electronic, only because you can increase the font size, and as you get older, your vision starts to go, and I've started to come up against that wall where I'm like, okay, well, maybe I need to increase the font size a little more. Maybe it needs to be a little brighter, more contrast. And then this last weekend, I went to my optometrist, and they're like, and you need progressive lenses now too, so you can have that up front or up close vision. I'm like, yes, I am getting old.
Yeah,
It'll
so
happen to all of us.
I mean, I find that, I don't care if it's digital or paper. I mean, there are, I like the old paperbacks because I just like the feel of them, and I like the cover artwork, and I like the object of
Hmm.
it, but also at the same time, there are some books where I think, well, I don't feel like I need to own a physical copy of this, but I'd like to have a digital one. I've been trying. It's not possible to do it with everything, but all the books in my collection, if there's a digital copy of it as well, I'll try to get that too. So if my house burns down, I know I can just grab my hard drive, and at least I won't lose everything in my collection. In my go bag, there's like my emergency, like 10 terabyte hard drive. Everything's on there. So grab that and
Right.
go. Everything else can go to the flames, right? But so yeah, I like to have a copy of absolutely everything. And I've got so many books now. I mean, on my Kindle now, I have something like 1,000 books. And
Hmm.
oh man, I'm gonna die before I read all this stuff. I just need to kind of like, try and get as much of it read as possible.
Right, but there's also the joy of having the collection, of curating it, being like, this is what I like and appreciate, even if you don't actually put eyes on like every word that's involved in it.
Well,
I
it's
think that I'm a
hobbies, right? It's like collecting books and reading books are two different hobbies.
right.
It's not the same hobby.
It isn't. As a avid comic book collector, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Well, it's about to come up on my I need to go to work alarm. So I want to thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate the time and the conversation.
Oh, my pleasure. I mean, it's we've had a great conversation about aviation here as well, which I wasn't expecting. And that was always the
Right.
best. You know,
Yeah,
um,
I do love how conversations they start in one place and then end up in completely different areas. It's These conversations are a lot like dating, where like you just got to find that groove, and then once you're in it, then you're like, all right, cool. I
I
know
think
what
the
to
thing
talk about now.
that always comes through to me when talking to people in fandom is there's a passion and enthusiasm for the things that we love. And
Mhm.
that's what I always love about fandom. To me, is kind of going, hey, check this cool thing out. Is I've seen this cool thing, I've read this cool book. That's what I love the most about fandom is being able to share a passion for something with people, whether that's Star Trek or whether that's something else. That's the thing that keeps me coming back, makes me want to be a part of it.
Mhm. All right, well, sir. Well, have a lovely day. I do appreciate your time.
You too. Well, thanks again.
All right, take care.
Bye bye.